some visual effects fun facts, because one of the three of us, has a degree in animation.
Is this person is in the room with us?
Can you see this person?
Maybe he's animating himself, and we've just been talking to the ghost
Is
the entire
the
time.
degree in animation with us? Is
it with us in the room?
I can hear it.
Do you feel its presence? I can hear it on the wind.
Oh, I love you guys.
Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
World! I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
Welcome everybody to the One Night Film Podcast. I'm your host Seth Mossberg, and we got the Nolan Bros back. Let's go!
Hoot, hoot.
Hoot, hoot. Man, we have not had an episode in a long time. I think the last one we did was Memento, and before that it was like before our summer break. So
It would have been Oppenheimer, wouldn't it?
well, yeah, that was a bonus episode because it was Barbenheimer, but I think we're going to do Oppenheimer Revisited sometime soon. But as I look, Memento was like 20 episodes ago, and then before that, 20 weeks, and then Inception before that, episode 27. So yeah, it's been a while, and I realized that, and I was like, man, we need to get back on the Nolan train, get those episodes done. So
what a movie to do that with.
yes, Interstellar.
This is top 5 movies for me now.
Okay,
It was amazing.
cool.
It was so good. It made me reevaluate my top 5. So I have a new top 5.
Wow. All right. Yeah. No, I love Interstellar. I've said that Tenet is one of my favorite Nolan movies, and Zach does not agree with that. Which doesn't matter because it's my favorite. Tenet is my favorite because it's crazy and breaks your brain for a little bit and continues every time. That one is rewatchable because of how many things you can get out of it each time you watch it. Inception is along the same lines of Interstellar, where it's just really good, really well told story. But Interstellar is just another level. I think it's got a lot more heart behind it. Whereas Inception doesn't feel forced. It's just the relationship between
businessy.
It's businessy. That is the point. I mean, they're trying to plant the thought in their target's mind, but also the drama is mostly with the mental image of Maul versus I forgot his name, Leonardo DiCaprio's character. Which yes, the relationship between husband and wife is very strong, and yet it doesn't feel there because it's not always her. It's just his figment of his imagination. Interstellar is a father and a daughter relationship that just hits you to the core. And I think Matthew McConaughey put in his all for this. And Jessica Chastain
Did he win an Oscar for this? He had to.
I don't know. I'll have to look.
Well, they definitely won something for some award for this movie, that's for sure.
Interstellar Awards. Yeah, I don't know what they got nominated for and what they won.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey got one.
Hans Zimmer was nominated for Best Achievement in Music Written for Motion Picture that year. Oh, that's the Academy Awards. It won Best Visual Effects, which I'm going to talk about that in a bit.
Oh, he was just a nominee for the 2015 as the Best Actor.
Even getting nominated. Anne Hathaway and Jessica Chastain also got nominee for Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress for the Saturn Awards. And then it won the Best Science Fiction Film of 2015 for the Saturn Awards. So there's a lot of different awards that they won and were nominated for. So I really think that's just a trend with Nolan at this point. But yeah, it is crazy. And you guys saw it for the first time. I made you watch it for this episode. What were your thoughts? What did you know about it beforehand, and what do you think coming out of it?
I have not ever seen it before, as you said, but I have, like, through cultural osmosis, like a general understanding of sorts. Like, they go something about space, something about really good black holes designed, and then something like some weird time stuff. And then I think I'd seen that one clip of like, those are mountains, those are waves, but that so I didn't really have a whole lot of context for what's going on. So, and I don't really think I was like totally spoiled, but I had an idea for, I mean, it's a Nolan film, so you're kind of like, okay, the beginning is related to the end, and then there's probably something going on between like the father and the daughter. So I kind of had an idea for what's going on, but it was still pretty good. Although it was also, the context that I was watching it was not necessarily the most optimal, and did feel a little long at times. So I'll say that much for starting off.
I hadn't heard much about it at all. The only thing I really knew is that there was time dilation, or the relativity while you're going around the gargantua. The black hole it's different. And then I heard about the wave scene, and obviously the memes with Matthew McConaughey crying and laughing while he's watching his kids, but I didn't know what he was laughing and crying at. I just knew it from the memes. So I actually went in very blind, I'd like to say, because I had no idea like how it was going to end. I didn't know if he was even going to get to see his daughter again. I just know the start, basically. And I'm very glad that was the case because my mind was blown by the end.
As opposed to Inception. Inception had a lot of fan talk, I believe, or pop culture built around it very quickly, and Inception became not just the literal definition of Inception, but a dream within a dream. That's what it became known as, and then a lot of memes came from that. But Interstellar is one that is a dormant giant, where there's not a lot that can be joked about it in meme culture. There's not a lot of concepts that can be used outside of the movie, and so it's just its own thing, and a lot of people are surprised with how crazy it is, and I think the runtime has something to do with it. I still watch it and I'm like, oh, this is a 3-hour movie, but it's worth it. Like every minute you're glued to your screen, and it's so good. I think along the same lines of how this movie excels is especially with Hans Zimmer's score. Man, I think it's one that just hits you hard every time, and he expresses what you're seeing through music and helps you experience it more. Yeah, it's just an amazing movie, and it is long. I think that's its only downside for the most part, but it's not filled with fluff. It's quality the whole time.
And I'd say like the score part itself is like one of like the major really good achievements of it. And that also like I think it's like there's like the one like few of the memes I actually see about this film are always like related to like the Hans Zimmer score. It's like the Interstellar theme. It's always like the one person like going like wee. That sort of thing, like doing like the spinning thing or whatever with like the Zimmer score. That's like the only ever memes I see about it. But I think that's just,
I don't know what meme you're talking about, but okay.
You seriously have it? Okay, maybe let me listen.
William is starting to become more cultured than I am because I've also not seen that meme.
Yeah, I've been to
Hans Zimmer Interstellar spinning. Let's try spinning. That's a good trick. Oh, like the docking scene. I see what you mean.
Yeah. And then like there's like the ones where it's always like the spinning part.
Okay. Well,
that scene. Guys, I ran out of nails for this movie. I don't have any nails anymore because I was chewing them all off.
Yeah, let's walk through the movie. One thing that I think is especially creative on Nolan's part is how he grounds this movie. And we've always said that Nolan's movies are grounded just enough so that you appreciate it and like relate to it. But then it's a little twist that goes, pew, and that's why the story exists. But even more so, this one has testimonies from the people who experienced the Great Dust Bowl from the 40s. It was right around the Great Depression. So
30s.
When was the Dust Bowl?
1930s, because it was right before World War I.
Yeah, started in 1930, ended in 1936. But taking those testimonies, those very real testimonies, and not only using that to influence his story and his world that he's created of this Dust Bowl that our world experiences, but also paying tribute to those people who experienced that and lived through that, I think is really creative and useful. And you understand that any person who knows a little bit about American history remembers that happened, and they understand immediately that's what's happening. But then you see a modern type of, it's not modern like they have cell phones and everything, because this was made in 2014, so it's not modern, but it's insinuated without telling you that it's the second Dust Bowl. And that is show, don't tell. That is the pinnacle of what movies should do, is show, don't tell. I just watched Madam Web last night, and there are multiple scenes where they show it. They show something happening and then immediately ruin the scene by having a character explain what you just saw in the scene. So, for example, a bird flies and hits a window, and Madam Web's whole thing is that she sees the future and then she can change a little bit of it. So a bird comes and hits her window, and then she looks at it, and then she kind of rewinds, and she realizes the window isn't broken and the bird's not there. So she lifts the window, the bird flies through and then flies out. So obviously she saved the bird's life. And then she's like, it's a good thing you didn't die that time. Yeah, that's what you're showing the whole time. You don't need to say that. So Nolan shows and doesn't tell. That's a marks of a good story, and that's at least how you perceive this opening of the Dust Bowl being now a second Dust Bowl in early 2000s to around early 10s.
I think the world setting too, like, I think it was brilliant for Nolan to also make the setting and all of the other parts of this new modern world that he's created to be much more simple. Like, he said that there's no more national wars. Like, it's a one world government from what you can collect, which is something that we as Christians aren't for. But it simplifies the world to the point where you can have stuff like NASA working on this, and it has almost infinite funding. And it simplifies it to where it's like, it doesn't really matter like what country this is in. Kind of assume it's America because, I mean, America.
Because okra.
Yeah, exactly. That's where NASA is stationed. So
yeah,
it's
I think it's
only
pretty
fair
obvious
to
it's
assume.
America.
Yeah, but it doesn't need to be known that it's America because this world is much simpler.
Yeah,
That
it's a
makes
dystopian.
sense.
It's a dystopian past where it hasn't. Again, the movie's almost 10 years old now, but it doesn't need to be set in that time period. It's just ambiguous. You're right.
Well, it's really more of like an example of like retrofuturism, which is the idea of like a future that is both futuristic but at the same time backwards looking. And I will say, I think one of my favorite parts of the film is like the first half because of the interesting world building that's going on, but also because like we're focusing on a farming family, and a lot of like basically just because of my background, I felt very relatable to a lot of these characters. Because if you didn't know, I was born on a farm, whatever, and so
Born and raised.
Yep, that's how it goes. Don't you know? I just did like 2 different accents right there. But yeah, so I did like the first half, and there, I will say I'm somewhat critical of a little bit of the world building that's going on because I don't think he's insinuating that there's one world government. It's more the fact that like there just isn't. The world is basically so devastated. Like he talks about like 6 billion people, and apparently there isn't that many more. And like world population is very apparently plummeted. It sounds more like basically it's just like there's so few people that everyone's focused on agriculture and in order to survive and to feed a growing population. And it is like it's very much a like he's basically portraying this idea where in the future the past has been revisited in a sense like you have a secondary dust bowl and you have these fears of like everything's dirty. Like you really see that in the first part of the film, which I really liked. Like when they're playing baseball, you see their clothes are all dirty. There's like air sirens, and they're just like, oh, look, there's the dust storm. It's just a natural thing that happens. Like everyone's got the masks and the goggles to protect them from that sort of stuff, and all of like the machinery looks very worn down. And that's again very reminiscent because like in my background on my family's farm, like yeah, you don't get nice and fancy new stuff and toys. You get like stuff that you're working with, and I really like the design of the tractors, which are apparently robotic. But it was very interesting. Like yeah, those look like something that could potentially actually exist in the future. The only downside I would say is like I am a little skeptical of the idea of like an ecocide where like you're actually going to die, like the atmosphere is going to be destroyed. That's a little far-fetched. Even the idea that like you can only grow corn seems a little like interesting because there's a couple of creative liberties taken with stuff like that. Like the idea that like we're going to lose and suffocate, quote unquote. That's not really how like the atmosphere works in that sort of sense. But regardless though, I think he does portray a very interesting example of like a world that's dying, but it's doing it slowly, and like everyone's just like doesn't really know what to do. And that's the whole point of like of Matthew McConaughey's character, who we can never remember these characters' names because they're just, you only know like the actor. But like his character is like very much like his father-in-law really hits the hammer home when he says like you're like a pioneer, an explorer, someone who wants to go places, and everybody here is just looking down onto Earth and like trying to just make ends meet. And like, you know, in some sense I can understand that, and it's a really good example of like portraying how this character feels versus like the world that he's stuck in, and the fact that he has to deal with like he's a farmer, even though he doesn't necessarily look like he wants to be that life per se, but he's still doing it though because he's a father or whatever. He's got a family to take care of, which is another good theme we can probably talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear and necessity that is set in stone for the world that they're living in. It's the mini side plot of what Coop's son will do, who actually is played by a young Timothy Chalamet, if you didn't notice. Timothy Chalamet
Really?
is his, it's Coop's son, but he knows that his son is like not that bright, and so everyone's like, he's gonna make a good farmer. Josh's mind is blown that Timothy Chalamet
I didn't even notice.
Did you not notice him in there?
You didn't notice?
I just didn't recognize him.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Well, because like he's not in there for like super long, but like yeah, at the beginning it's Timothy Chalamet, and he's like 15 or whatever, like at least in the film. So
yeah, so he's like, he's not that bright, so he's going to be a good farmer. And then Coop's like, yeah, I figured. But then they're like, Murph can't use her genius to her full potential because they're like, there's really no more need for scientists. We're just trying to survive as long as possible. There's no hope. And that whole classroom scene is super interesting because it's way ahead of its time trying to rewrite history. Now, that's a little dystopian still, but saying that their new updated textbooks say that the moon landing never happened. And Murph got in trouble for that because obviously Coop has been a pilot both for NASA and for the Air Force, I believe. And so they're into aviation. And so they're like, Murph got in trouble because she believes that the moon landing actually happened. And Coop's like, well, what are you talking about? And then he gets expelled because he pushed back. So I don't know. That whole scene shows what hopelessness there is, both with the facts of history and why that matters to their future. I believe it's because they don't want to give kids hope for possibly getting off this planet before the dust consumes them all. I believe that was the government's position and belief in doing that. And yeah, then he ends up having to bring Murph home from school because she's too smart for her own good and thinking for herself, which is a great trait to have, unfortunately, for the story.
Oh, yeah.
Right from the beginning, they're having their breakfast scene, and Murph brings in her moon landing pod model and says, oh, it broke, it fell off the shelf, and they're like, is it your ghost again? And right from the beginning, Nolan is telling you what the problem is, and he's going to visit that at the very end. Like, it's a bookend that is connected that is just so Nolan of him to point back to that exact moment. 4 minutes in
The whole
from starting the
thing
movie.
is a wormhole.
Yes.
Did you kind of catch that theme? Or it's,
Yeah.
Obviously, you have the classic paper diagram when you just fold a piece of paper, but that's what he's doing with the whole film. He's taking one hole or one question that's at the very beginning and an answer at the very end, and he's tying them to by just bending the whole script to have them tie together. And it's so awesome. It blows my mind. Like when, especially towards the end, when Cooper leaves the Tesseract and he shakes what's-her-face's hand while they're in the Murph. No, not Murph. The
Dr. Brand.
Dr. Brand.
Anne Hathaway's
Anne
character.
Hathaway.
Oh, I thought
Anne
you said when
Hathaway's
he
character.
left the Tesseract, which is at the very end of the movie, when he wakes up and he's in the new Utopia.
No, while he's on the way out. So he's leaving the Tesseract and he shakes her hand.
Oh,
Because it was like first
yeah,
hand.
the halfway, like she's
And-
like halfway through the movie already, and he's revisiting that point.
All of that blew my mind. I think, okay,
the whole Tesseract
Tenet
scene
had,
is
for Christopher Nolan movies, Interstellar has the most wow by far
Yeah.
for me. Tenet, it was really cool because it was like, this is just crazy, this is insane, what a concept.
Theme.
And you're like, themes is very strong for Tenet. For Inception, it was more just an impressive sort of wow, because you know that this is all planned and it's like, oh, this all went to plan, this is great. But Interstellar, I was literally sitting in my seat like, oh my word, it all came together, because I didn't know I had questions at the very beginning until they got answered at the end. Because like,
yes,
I didn't even think twice about Anne Hathaway or Dr. Brand shaking the hand of the other person, of whoever they were, only to find out that they are actually them. They are them.
They are them.
They are them. And
Preserve.
that was such a cool idea. That was brilliant.
Nolan really answers the questions you didn't have, but you're satisfied nonetheless. That was a good way to put it. My mind thinks of a great book I read called Unquestioned Answers, and it's about things like isms that Christians say that aren't fully backed by the Bible. It's a good book, but that's the same. The title, Unquestioned Answers, is like at the end of Interstellar, you're just given an answer and you're like, I wasn't even thinking about that. Like you thought that that Brand reaching out and touching that swirly something was just part of the time dilation and the adventure, and then you remember that because he focuses on it for those couple seconds, and then he comes back to it at the end and you're like, that's what that was. So everything makes sense in the end, even though it doesn't. I do want to say Mackenzie Foy played Murph all those years ago, 10 years ago, and now she's 23, so she was 13 when that happened. Not so much now when she's 23, but she looked like a younger version of Jessica Chastain. So I think when you compare your young actors to look like your adult actors, that is really good. And if they act the same, like they're the same character, like you have no doubt that it's the same character. I think that is such an amazing piece of this movie that I can appreciate, that I've always thought I've liked, that Murph as a child looks like Murph as an adult.
It was impressive casting. Very impressive casting. Same with Timothy Chalamet, which I didn't know that was him. And the older, what's the brother's name?
Isn't it Casey Affleck? They played like older Timothy Chalamet. Is Affleck?
Casey Affleck.
Yeah, I liked him a lot too.
I think that was also like really good casting because again, how you were saying like show don't tell. You don't have to guess at all whether this is the brother or not, because it's just casting to the point where you without a shadow of doubt, you know that, oh, this is Murph. Oh, this is I've got the memory of a goldfish.
Tom.
This is the brother. Yeah, Tom. This is Tom.
Why did I not know that the older version of Tom is Ben Affleck's brother? That's my mind blowing of behind the scenes.
I didn't know Ben Affleck had a brother. I'm honest, being honest. I
Well,
thought he was
the funny part is that Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are like, they grew up together. and they're still in movies together. Like, that's like the longest bromance of Hollywood. I just watched Good Will Hunting like a week or two ago. That one was a very interesting movie. But it's interesting that Casey Affleck is in the movie and not Ben Affleck, and Matt Damon is Man. Is Matt Damon the type of celebrity who he just shows up in random movies without being announced, like, or am I crazy?
Yeah,
Well, because I know that like behind
that's
the
exactly what I was thinking. Right?
Because I know that behind the scenes that like they didn't really want to reveal Matt Damon was in the film because then people are going to be looking for him. But yeah, like he is the type of character who, like for example, like the Thor Ragnarok, like he was there and he played like he was just like there.
I think he was Loki. He was the actor of Loki in Asgard.
Yeah.
So
the in-world
so I think,
actor.
I think Matt Damon is like big enough where like he can play big roles, but he can also like not play big roles. And this is actually interesting because this is a few years later after Interstellar, Matt Damon would play another astronaut in The Martian, which actually is a really good film that we should really talk about because it's kind of like a smaller version of Interstellar in scope and scale, but it's also really good. So
I thought seeing Matt Damon come out of the pod, I had no idea he was in the movie, but it was like, holy cow, that's another big actor. He's gonna have a huge part to play in this. And at that point, I'm like, hold up, what's Dr. Mann doing here? Like, what's his purpose? There's no way that he just is here on this planet to say that it's a good planet. There's got to be more to this story. And oh boy, that he is the reason I don't have nails right now, because frick you, Matt Damon, because now I won't be able to scratch anything.
He really messed with your mind and the whole crew's mind. Like, he is a double crosser who's good at acting. Not Matt Damon's good at acting. Dr. Mann is good at acting. Yeah. He really played it up so that he would have a way off this planet. And yeah, man, the whole scene of him hijacking the ship takes its time. That's one reason why it's so long, but it's because Nolan doesn't want to cut anything. He wants to show everything. And let's talk a second.
With scenes like that, it's needed.
Yes. Let's talk for a second about the docking scene, because that is probably the most stress that someone could experience in a movie like that. It's insane how well he plays it up and is written and is edited and all that, because you think he might get away, but also that justice must be served. Also, the way Nolan set up previous scenes to show what the docking scene should look like and how it should be careful and slow with like the claws and stuff. When Man is going to it, he goes and he docks and then it like slips and it's not on completely. And you know that's wrong. That's not how it should be just by looking at it. It's not any dialogue. It's show, don't tell. And the way that he dies is scary. So scary.
Terrifying.
He's trying to be all dramatic and he's like, there's a moment in a minute. Silence. That is one scene where the sound is building, and when it cuts to silence, it's not only quiet, it seems to suck any possible noise out of the room. It's like you don't want to cough, you don't want to sniffle, you don't want to clear your throat. It's just dead silent. And that is so good.
The sound of silence is deafening in that part.
Yes.
It's so well placed. That's something Christopher Nolan is great at. I think of Oppenheimer. The dead silence after the bomb goes off is another instance where I think where silence is just so powerful. This, I say, is second to that. I can't think of any other time where silence in a movie plays more than any sort of soundtrack you could have put in there.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
I want to watch it here.
Guys, I'm actually not even kidding. I was biting my nails so much at that point that I literally started bleeding out of my finger. I'm not kidding. Like, this movie tortured my fingers. I should have had food or gum to chew on.
Yeah.
This is not about my life or Cooper's life. This is about all mankind. There is a moment.
It is not.
Chills.
Oh my word.
I gotta show you this one.
If you've ever seen the movie Interstellar, you absolutely have to watch this. So as we all know, soundtracks play a critical role in dictating the emotion of any given scene in a movie. But Christopher Nolan just actually released this scene from the movie Interstellar with no soundtrack. Listen to how much context just the addition of a soundtrack adds to this scene. It's just chills. It's insane. Here's it without it first.
Dr. Mann, listen to me.
This is not about my life or Cooper's life. This is about all mankind. There is a moment.
It is not.
Now listen to the same exact clip, but this time it's going to have the original soundtrack composed by Hans Zimmer.
Dr. Man, listen to me.
It's not about my life or Cooper's life. This is about all mankind. There is a moment.
Womp womp. Oh.
Oh boy,
Get bamboozled. Yeah.
that is what they call it, bait and
Perfect.
switch.
I should have made the final cut.
And then it's all going wrong. Then he starts the whole docking maneuver, which itself is also stressful.
Just back to back. Like, the stress of, oh my goodness, his mask is broke and he's breathing in too much ammonia. Get him to safety. And you're like, how on earth is he going to get saved? And then Dr. Brain comes along and saves him. And you're like, oh, okay, we're good. Wait, they're racing to the ship to try and, like, beat Dr. Man there. Hang on, they've got to beat him. Oh no, they didn't beat him. And then it's this, and it's just back to back to back to back. Just super stressful moments. It was so well made and, like, well spaced out and also well timed. Like, it was all, like, it was long. That spot probably took, what, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes of screen time? Like, just this nail-biting, stressful portion. Real T-gripper of a scene. And it felt much longer than it actually played out, because you're like, this is just, there's no way. Because in the back of my head while I was watching it, I was thinking, there's no way that this actually happens, because we've got to win, right? The good guys win. Like, come on, justice has got to be served. And you think, oh, well, Dr. Man died, but wait, hang on, there's no way that they can actually get to the ship. And then he pulls off that impressive maneuver, and it's Christopher Nolan at this point. He's like shooting you to new depths of hopelessness, and you're like, okay, well, now Cooper's dying because he's not breathing in right. Oh wait, no, he's alive. And in every single part of this stressful situation, Christopher Nolan has given you less and less hope for the next scene, but he somehow still gives you something to hold on to, and there's still triumph in such little hope.
Yeah, and I think, like, one of the most impressive parts about, like, the whole docking scene is that he makes something mundane extremely stressful. And this is, I'll just kind of relate this to, like, space films or any film that is trying to be, quote unquote, scientifically accurate in space. Like Star Wars, you know, who cares? Okay, people can, like, somehow be blown out of spaceships and, like, survive using the Force, and there's lasers, and so that doesn't matter. But, like, when you talk about, like, films that are trying to be accurate to how we understand space and trying to make an intense and dramatic moment, that can be really difficult, because it's like, it's not like you're fighting anything. It's like you have to, like, it's these tiny things that are very stressful. And I think that he really nails it home with this movie, and especially with the docking scene, because it's like, it's docking. It's like you're just, like, connecting the two ships together, and, like, you're not, like, shooting aliens. You're not fighting a galactic force of evil or whatever. You're just trying to get one ship connected to another ship. But that is, like, one of the most intense moments of the scene of the movie, because he lingers on it so well, because you know the stakes that are related to it, and also because you know what's going to happen if they fail, because you just got somebody get blown up and exploded because they improperly docked it. And he really focuses on, like, the fact, okay, you have, like, the pilot, and you have, like, one guy who's telling this other guy to look up there and to keep an eye on what's going on, and just all of it is just played really well. And I think it's an example of making something that in some way isn't really significant or intense extremely dramatic, and, like, something you're really glued on. You're like, are they gonna make it or not? So I think that's just world class in film, I guess.
Yeah, that scene is something else. I want to talk about TARS and how to do comedy in a non-comedy movie, because I think that has been a big problem with Hollywood recently, is how they do comedy. They think that everyone needs to be quippy. Man, we need to revisit Is the MCU Dead or something like that, because, or how the MCU influenced Hollywood in the wrong way, because they thought the same way that Zach had talked about the Nolan effect last week with Spider-Man. That's why Amazing Spider-Man was more gritty, is because Batman Begins and The Dark Knight did so well. They were like, oh, we just need darker, grittier take on the character, and that'll do good. No, it wasn't that it was dark and grittier. It was that it worked for Batman because that's what Batman needed. Before The Dark Knight, it was kind of cheesy, very goofy Batman. And making him more serious is what Batman needed. That wasn't necessarily what Amazing Spider-Man needed. Now, Josh has his own opinions on The Amazing Spider-Man. But it had its rights and it had its wrongs. With comedy, people see the MCU and they're like, oh, those were so successful. It's because Tony Stark quips all the time, or Thor quips once in a while. That's part of their characters, especially for Tony Stark. But also the other characters can just have some one-liners that are funny and not break character. Some of them are better than others. Not saying they're all perfect. Yeah. But then that doesn't work well with other movies and other characters and other stories, because it's not the mode that comedy should be shown, or that token that is just put into the movie and it's going to be success. That's not how it breaks the immersion of that character. And so with Tars, pretty much the only comedy relief in this movie. It's funny because he's a robot and he's AI and he has his humor level, I believe. Cooper's repairing him and he says
settings, general settings, security settings,
honesty, new setting, 95%.
Confirmed. Additional customization.
Humor, 75%.
Confirmed. Auto self-destruct, T-minus 10, 9.
Let's make that 60%.
60% confirmed. Knock, knock.
You want 55?
That is really good. I love that. I laugh at that every time. It's so funny. But yeah, Tars being so objective and just so blunt is what the movie needs. And that's what makes it a little bit of fun more than just the intensity. And it lifts the hopelessness, because Tars doesn't have the humanity, the morality of doom and gloom. We're all going to die. We need to survive. He's just a robot. And you can't hurt a robot's feelings. They don't have feelings. They're not alive. They don't have a soul. But that's his objective humor to try and make you laugh even in a hopeless situation is really good.
And another thing too is that, like, I gotta give credit. Like, I think Tars has one of the most unique robotic designs I've ever seen, because like he's basically like a rectangle, like, or a cube.
He's Steve, but without a head.
Yeah, essentially.
Steve
it's just like
Minecraft.
and it's like I was really impressed and like just like shocked, maybe not surprised the first time I saw those types of robots. It's like, what in the world is this? It's like, how is this function as a machine? Like, how does it traverse? But then, like, you see how, like, he might look like basically a giant cube or whatever, but he does, like, have, like, the tiny, smaller cube arms, legs, whatever thing he's, and, like, especially, like, when, like, the explosion happens and you see him, like, running out. It's just such a unique and interesting design that I think really makes Interstellar a bit more unique in regards to robots, because robots are either, like, they're just, like, apps, like, you don't see them, they don't have a physical body, or they basically look like humans. They're androids and stuff like that. Whereas Tars is like, that's clearly not human, but it's also like almost like an animal, but it's not because it's a robot. And just like that design thing and how like he functions and how he like is supposed to move around, because I think he must be really awkward like moving places, but at the same time somehow he does it well, and like he has like his tiny little arms that can pull out and do sorts of things. And yeah, it's just, I really give credit to the design for Tars. It's really unique and interesting. And also, like you mentioned, is humor.
I think Tars is the most perfect character design in writing for any sort of robot ever. The shape of Tars makes you not even think of them as a human, which is good, so that there's no connection or any sort of thing like when Tars ends up dying. And the humor setting that he actually has is perfectly balanced to the point where it doesn't take away from very serious moments, but it adds just that little bit of texture to it, adds a little bit of seasoning to the moments, and it's not done in a very, I don't know, overwhelming or like just over humor kind of way, but you still remember it. It's not just like glossed over and quick. And Tars is like the most optimistic person or most optimistic being on the ship, it feels like. And you are thankful for Tars because he's borderline keeping everything together because of like how much he's able to contribute to the whole team. And I just love Tars. He's awesome. And I think it's my favorite robot from any movie ever.
Okay, some visual effects fun facts, because someone, one of the three of us, has a degree in animation.
Is this person is in the room with us?
Can you see this person?
Maybe he's animating himself and we've just been talking
to the degree in animation with us?
Is it with us in the room?
I can hear
Do
it.
you feel its presence? I can hear it on the wind.
Oh, I love you guys.
Okay, we got to talk about that because the animation is beautiful. And the black hole, you probably know the interesting facts about the black hole.
Can I share it, or are you going to steal it from me?
Okay, I'll let you tell. It's just awesome.
This is something, I don't know that Neil deGrasse Tyson made it popular, or if it was just some behind the scenes promotion that Nolan released, but with the black hole, which is just beautiful. Part of it is an amazement at something like that being possibly grounded in reality and real. And I want to look at it while I'm talking about it. Yeah. It's so big. The best part about it is that they didn't know how to make a visual effects black hole. They didn't know what a black hole looks like. We have now, I believe in recent years, photographed a black hole and it's still very fuzzy.
Yeah.
But it's weird because black holes are a phenomenon that are not really physics-based, or at least extra physics-based. And so what the visual effects people did is they took mathematical equations from scientists. And scientists have just been pouring over these equations, just trying to figure out more about black holes, and haven't really come up with a visual representation. And the visual effects artists took these mathematical equations and just put it into the VFX simulation programs. And out came this disc, this multi-dimensional disc that's both flat and both three-dimensional. And it looks amazing with all this bloom. And again, it's made to look cinematic. But then the scientists went and said, yeah, I suppose we haven't realized it, but that's what a black hole would look like. So this helped with scientific exploration and possibly made the world of animation and visual effects meet the world of science to try and get more visual representation through math, because they work together. And it's amazing at how it looks. It's so grand. The music goes well with it. It shows the scale. And yet when Coop starts going into the black hole, you can see all of the dilation of what it might look like. Obviously, we haven't done it yet. But that and the wormhole is more of just a flowy, liquid type of existence. But the wormhole was also really cool. But man, especially if you're watching it on a big screen, the black hole scene is overwhelming.
Along with the Tesseract scene, which gets... But then again, that was more creative liberties. And this is where, if I might come in, because I don't have a degree in animation, but I do have a big interest in science, especially astronomy. Joshua knows this, and you too, because in high school, before I became involved in the potential career I am right now, I loved astronomy, and I wanted to be not an astronaut but an astronomer, because space is beautiful and it's grand. And I think that's one of the things I'd like to say about this film is that I'm not sure if it's Nolan's most ambitious film, but it's perhaps his most ambitious in regards to what it's portrayed in scope. Because there's nothing bigger than space, because it's huge. And I think that's one of my favorite parts about this film is that, one, it's scientifically accurate for the most part. There's little creative liberties taken here and there, but at least in what they're trying to portray and how it all works, it's astonishingly scientifically accurate. And that's because they had a scientist, a world-class scientist, who was behind the scenes and helping everyone work on and saying, here's what we know and here's how it would probably look. And also, it's beautiful because it's portraying the beauty of space, and space is absolutely magnificent. When they show Saturn, love that stuff. I think one of the reasons I really like this film, though, is because Nolan is able to use his cinematic expertise to show the beauty of space, and it's glorious. When you go to the different planets, when you see the black holes and that space phenomenon. Interestingly enough, I think that scientists actually were able to learn more about black holes because of the depictions that were portrayed. But again, it's just beautiful and it's magnificent, and it's so grand and big and vast because that's what space is. It's huge. If you ever want to see something that's really beautiful, I'd look up the Laniakea supercluster, which is basically what our local collection of galaxies, hundreds of thousands of, maybe even millions of galaxies, and it's basically it's magnificent what it looks like. So that's just one of the things I really love with this film, and that it's scientifically accurate for the most part, the relativity sphere, or the fact how the space hole looks. Yeah, look at that. That's just
Yeah,
or the one to the far right on the top right corner. So if you go up, that one right there. That is there you go right there. That's our home supercluster.
Wow. Guys, and to think that we have a relationship with the guy who made all of that.
Yes!
Oh my, blows my mind.
Yeah.
Blows my mind.
I think with Nolan making a space movie and how grand he goes, there's not a ton of visual. I take that back. It's not like there's supernovas and there's, what's the one? There's the Pillars of Creation, whatever those are.
Yeah,
There's
You
not
got the nebula,
pillars.
the big
Yeah.
nebula stuff.
There's not nebulas, there's not supernovas, but it still shows the vastness. And I need to read this first because this is so telling of how small we are, and that this movie really portrays that well. It makes, not only does it make you feel hopeless throughout all of it because of their situation, but it makes you feel small. And yet Psalm 8. I'm just going to read all of it. It's so good. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies, to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them. You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands, and you put everything under their feet. All flocks and herds and all animals of the wild, the birds of the sky, the fish of the sea, all that swim in the paths of the sea. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth, and for that matter, all the universe. Like, he just is, his handiwork is shown everywhere. And even if that's not what a black hole looks like, if we get a glimpse of that and how small, you can see the little ship flying by and how you realize we're insignificant, and yet we are loved and have a personal relationship with that creator who made that black hole. That's amazing.
Bars. Oh my word. Also, that desk slam was perfect with the, like, it was perfect. It's just so beautiful. Will, I know you also love stars. I also love stars. I don't know if you guys knew this about me, but if there was an opportunity for me to go to space, but I knew I was going to die there, guys, I'm doing it. I'm sorry I'm leaving you behind. Yeah. I don't care even if I come back and you guys are really old, I'll just be happy to see you again. Just like in Interstellar, like, I would love to go to space. I'd die for it. I would. Yeah. And just seeing this movie and being able to have, obviously, a animated or CGI representation of what space and what some of the things out there looks like, it's beautiful. It's amazing. And when I was watching it, I actually started to think about Job, weirdly enough. Because God's reply to Job is like, why are you doing this to me? And God's like, really? You're asking the God of the universe who does this?
He basically gives him like a glimpse of the behind the scene of the universe. And I think that's another thing about this, about the beauty of this film, is that we're not so much focusing on like the grandness entirety of space. We're also focusing on kind of the behind the scenes of space. Like, what's behind the wormhole, what's behind the black hole, what's in behind reality. And we see that with the Tesseract scene especially. So it's also like, you don't fully understand everything, but you get a glimpse of what's going on besides what you can see.
Yeah. Job 26. I know, Josh, you're already looking it up, but this is Job replying to one of his friends. And he's, again, praising God for his vastness and greatness. Job 26:7. He spreads out the northern skies over empty space. He suspends the earth over nothing. He wraps up the waters in his clouds, yet the clouds do not burst under their weight. He covers the face of the full moon, spreading his clouds over it. He marks out the horizon on the face of the waters for a boundary between light and darkness. The pillars of heaven quake aghast his rebuke. By his power he churned up the sea. By his breath the skies became fair. How faint the whisper we hear him. Who then can understand the thunder of his power?
I just got so many chills.
That's Job speaking in his despair. That's not even God when he's rebuking Job. Not rebuking, but there's a verse where in the middle, at the very end, God has his response to Job. And Job is like, all right, God, I get it. And God's like, no, I'm not done. Listen. Yeah. And Job's like, okay.
I love Job. And I think definitely here, it's feeling small is something that this movie, and obviously Job is definitely feeling in this passage. Because the grand scale of the universe, there's so much there. Like, while I was watching this movie, I was thinking, wow, Cooper is literally millions, billions of miles away, light years away from home. This world is so small, we're just so insignificant, but yet we serve the God who created it all, and he is what is orchestrating our lives. How much more can we trust him to make sure that he's going to do something good? I just think it's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's where like Dr. Brand's or Anne Hathaway's character's one little monologue about love takes on a bit of a different dimension, because like she talks about how like love transcends time and space and all realities, because they talk about like a fifth dimension or a fourth dimension that is beyond where like gravity it can be controlled. Like there's the they who control things that are beyond us and stuff like that. And then like that is like impressive and all that, but at the same time it's also like the idea of like love, which is beyond all that and can connect anyone and anything, no matter the distance, no matter the time, no matter which reality you are engaged in, is also, I think, like it takes on like a different meaning when you think like the person who is beyond us in every type of the metric, beyond space, beyond time, and the person who made all that still has some sort of connection with us through love is just astounding.
And even though we're talking about space and how grand it is, Matthew 10:29 and following, are not two sparrows sold for a penny, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. Even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. From the black holes down to the sparrows, God knows. And in between, and more important than all of it, is us, his creation, made in his image, who if we choose, we can have a relationship with him. And that's incredible.
I just love it. I'm sorry.
You were talking about going to space, and something that I almost cried at when it first came out. We're gonna watch it here really quick. Dude Perfect has an amazing group of creators who just make fun, creative, family-friendly content. But beyond that, they are Christians who at every live show are sharing the gospel at the very end. It's essential to who they are. One of the guys got a chance to go to space, and he was reflecting both the day before he went and also while he was up there. I want to watch that.
I cried during this. I cried. Yeah. I actually did.
Let's watch his first thoughts before he actually goes.
Do I believe in destiny? Well, let me say this. Dude Perfect in and of itself makes absolutely no sense. It really doesn't. Like, if we would just set out as 5 college guys to start this really dumb trick shot business, and it becomes what it has today, like I don't think I could really justify that in my own mind that was going to make sense. We've always said, and I do firmly believe, God just had a bigger plan for it than we ever did, and we were just kind of along for the ride. At the end of the day, whether somebody else believes it's destiny or I believe it was God's hand at work, like I do firmly believe there was way more at stake and kind of in the cards for Dude Perfect than we were ever planning on or could have kind of forced to happen.
Oliver.
Oh, guys. All right, now take it in, guys. Look.
See the curvature of the earth.
Wow. That's the dream, guys. That's the dream. Hey, if anybody watching this has tickets to go on one of those, hey, I'll do anything. I kid you not, anything.
Do you know the earth is flat? Just kidding.
That's proof right there. Actually, Dude Perfect has a deal with NASA, and they actually CGI'd the whole Earth to be round.
Sure. A couple other things I want to talk about before we wrap it up. You mentioned a while ago the meme of Cooper laugh crying at his messages, and I think that's one of the big emotional punch to the gut that you get. He's just gone through the wormhole. I think he's been in cryosleep for a little bit, so a lot of time has passed relatively, and his kids are all grown up. Tom has had a kid, and he gets to see him, and Cooper is smiling and laughing at his grandchild, and it's so cool. And then he kind of knows that Murph has not been making messages because his dad had been saying Murph doesn't want to do anything because she's all grumpy pouty for good reason. Yeah. And so he just expects to see Tom in these messages, and he's about to turn it off, and Murph's voice says, "Hey, Dad," and he's like, whoa, that hits you. And he's like, oh, she's calling me, and she's all grown up. It's like 20 years later, and she says, "You promised you would be back by the time I was your age. Well, today I turn whatever it is, 27. And he's like, he realizes he's made a promise he cannot keep. It crushes him.
It just plucks at the heartstrings. It does.
It's so heartbreaking to watch because he knows he's failed. And that's, at least as a guy, that's one thing you'd never want to feel, is wanting to make a promise you can't keep, and because you feel like you're protective. And that, I'm speaking for myself. I'm sure you guys feel it because you want to protect those you love. And his daughter is just the epitome of what he loves. Like he definitely loves Tom, but his daughter is so much more emotionally attached to him because of how that worked with his wife. And so he feels like, I mean, he did fail Murph, and that's part of the conflict, and it's so well written and all that, man.
The side plot where because like throughout all this time, like you're just looking at Coop and like what he's doing, and then like he has like this fear of like losing out on his family's experiences, and he does like do that because they go down to the planet, they get stuck there for longer than they intended to, and like you can like literally, someone talked about how you can on that planet you can literally hear like the tick is like every day or whatever, like that they're
Yeah.
missing out or whatever, or a year or something like that. And it's just like, and then he comes back up because like you just been out of cryo sleep for like maybe a few months or whatever, not super long. And they come up and it's like, oh, 23 years have happened. And then so he gets like 23 years of like watching his son go with his first girl, get married, have a kid, lose that kid. And he watches like his son like get more and more older and like dragged down by like the tough reality that he's in. And so it's supposed like it's beautiful, but it's also like sad. And I think that's why that meme has become a meme, because it's so good for conveying like what he's going through. And then especially like at the end when like he gets to see his daughter again through time and he's like behind the scenes as it were, and he realizes that he's the ghost, then he gets like even more like, whoa. It's just, yeah, it's really gut-wrenching, but also really good.
Another thing is, like, in this movie, you have to, like, understand that destiny is a thing. Like, stuff is going to happen the way that it's been made to happen. And, like, you start to realize that, especially when he starts pushing out books and doing Morse code to say, stay. That's when it clicked, and I'm like, whoa, this is all tying together. And
that was a twisty twist.
That was a good twisty twist. And then also still being able to see his daughter and like try and convince him is like, no, my biggest failure right now is sitting right in front of me and I'm trying to stop it. And he's like, no, there's nothing I can do, but I can still save the next generation. And the sacrifice that he made for the next generations to come is something that it just gives so much more depth to Cooper's whole line. And it's just amazing.
Yeah. The amount of hopelessness that is built up this whole movie kind of relates to our hopelessness and our depravity as humans. I mean, the depravity of humans also plays a role in this, and how Dr. Mann is evil and manipulative. Yeah. But at the same time, their whole situation is humanity is going to go extinct if nothing happens. So they do this whole journey, and it just is trial after trial and failure after failure, even with their one teammate who is stuck on the ship for years after they've been down to the water planet, and even lose one of the other guys in the wave, and realizing that they failed the other guy and on the ship and waiting so long, and it wasn't worth it. Brand feels like she failed because of her love interest being such a driving force, and she feels like a failure. It's just hopeless. And then he goes into the black hole. He finds that Tesseract area, and he realizes that the people in the future, that's why he said, we are them. And we created this for ourselves. We are the ones who created that wormhole back by Saturn in the future, so that past us, it's a Tenet thing where it has to happen that way or it's not going to happen at all. So people in the future have this fourth dimension of time that they can represent with this Tesseract, at least temporarily. And that's how not only he's able to shake hands with Brand through the Tesseract, but also be the ghost in Murph's room to do Morse code of stay, to push things off the shelf, and to make the equation that Tars got transmitted to the proper time, where he's tapping the watch second hand, and she's taking the Morse code and making it into the equation that saves the Earth and is able to make them the utopia that he then is transported to in the Tesseract. Man, on top of that, the way the entire movie finishes off is just, as I've said, hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. So much going wrong. The Tesseract and the realization and the salvation that they find at the end starts going up, and then he arrives in Utopia, and it goes up even more because he realizes that universe is thriving, and he sees children. The children are having fun and not just being put to be in school and made to be farmers. Like, it's so much life and joy. And on top of that, the very end of the movie, he gets Tars, he gets a ship, and he goes and finds Brand, and it flashes to where Brand ended up, with her helmet off on the planet, meaning that planet was able to sustain life. And they have another option. And if he had just gone to that planet first, they would have had the Utopia. Now they ended up with it eventually, but that's also just more hope. That's also kind of make you feel guilty, because Brand is now thriving. She's living on that planet,
and she's got the colony.
But yet no one's there with her. And so she's alone, even though she's made this discovery. It's wow.
It's just so good. Like, the ending, I think, is one of the best endings I've ever seen for a movie. Like, again, the show don't tell with her having the helmet off, I think was just that golden nugget that made the movie so good.
Yeah.
Nolan's great with stuff like that. Like in Inception, the spinning top nugget, it's just at the end. And it shouldn't mean as much as it does, but it just is what makes the movie so powerful. with Dr. Brand being there, and is like just another example on why love is just such a powerful thing. And if you just follow love, you'll be better off than just following science. There's definitely a huge theme in this movie for that, and I just think that's awesome.
I would just give a bit of a critique, because at least for me, when I did watch it, it did feel like a bit of a 180. Mostly the fact, like, I know that the whole point is that they're trying to find the equation, and they only have half of the equation. You need the information from inside the black hole to finish the equation. But at the same time, like, I didn't quite fully understand, like, what the importance of the equation was. Like, okay, we'll figure out how to use gravity more efficiently, and somehow that just suddenly solve all of our problems, and we can transport people on a spaceship. I mean, like, there's a bit more logistics associated with that. So for me, it felt a little bit more difficult to just suddenly, okay, I guess we suddenly have giant spaceships in the span of a generation. That would take many decades at the very least to even comprehend trying to build something of that scale. But whatever, it's okay. It's still like a pretty good thing.
It's science fiction, but also I think the equation was the fourth dimension equation. I might be wrong on that, but it might be the ability to.
It just wasn't super clear for me, which maybe that's, I think, probably why it just felt a little weird, because like I didn't fully understand what they were trying to do or whatever. So maybe that's probably why. But it was still pretty.
Information of time, like, because time is an assumption that was made in their world, but since it's like in a different dimension, needed to have a different part of the equation that was what they were plugging in for time to figure out the travel for the next dimension. Old travel, something like that. And so TARS was transmitting what the substitute for time would be, because in our world it's just constant, and it's like trying to solve for a fourth dimension that we just don't know one of the variants of.
It's the theory of relativity, and that time moves differently depending on where you are in space, and especially in a black hole, where it's assumed that there is no time, or that time works very differently. And so when TARS and Coop were in the black hole, TARS took a bunch of readings, made the equation, and then Coop translated them into Morse code to give to Murph. Murph was able to write down the equation that worked, whatever it was, and was able to harness the power of the fourth dimension so that they could get to this utopia, which is like the circle area, the cylinder world. And then from there on, scientists harnessed the fourth dimension of time more and more, so that they ended up with the wormhole and the Tesseract, which then again just loops constantly, because to them time doesn't restrain. And I think to wrap this all up, that's what heaven is going to be like. Now, they didn't completely show what it was like to live without time, or at least the comprehension of time as a construct, as something that restrains. But we're not going to have time in heaven. It's not going to be limited by, in a day or 80 years. It's not going to be limited by a lifetime, because it's eternal. We can't comprehend eternal, because that is what our finite minds can handle. And I can't wait for that day. But it's a little terrifying, because we're like, what does eternal mean? We don't fully get it. And there's a lot of Christian sci-fi thinkers who are like, maybe we'll be able to go back and revisit things, or have memories, or see historical biblical events, or even just world history things. And part of it is like, why would you want to? We're going to be so focused on praising God that we won't need to. I think that's partly my thought process, because I want to know things and I want to see how they played out rather than just hearing about a story. But at the same time, it's not going to matter at that point. It's not worth the effort to try and understand that when all you're focused on is God and his holiness when we're finally there. So
amen.
Yeah. And of course you get that final touching scene where Coop gets to finally get to be with his daughter, who's older than he is now, and he gets to see, more importantly, that this is who his family is. That his family didn't just die off; the generations have survived because of him. And I love that scene, especially like, when his daughter says, "You shouldn't watch your child die. You finally fulfilled your promise. Now you got to go do what you do best." And he takes the spaceship and leaves them. Yeah, great.
It's good stuff. All right. Is that it?
All right.
I think we're good.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching. Man, Interstellar is a good one. I know we've spoiled most of it, but if you haven't seen it, definitely go watch it. It is a wow movie. And apply all the things that we talked about, such as the vastness of creation and the hopelessness that we feel. But take that, watch the movie. It's worth it, man. It's so good. Follow us on all our socials. Give us a like rating, however that works on the platform. Share this with your friends. And stay tuned for next week, where we will have another banger episode. It's going to be good. We got some stuff cooking. It's going to be good. Until next week, know that you were loved. God bless.
See ya.
Peace out, brethren.
Yeah.